Ladies and gentlemen, we finally have the Switch 2. After 8 long years with the original Switch, we are now moving on to Nintendo's next console. I have been so excited for the Switch 2, and I knew straight away that I wanted to review this console once I got my hands on it. But I don't want to review this console in the traditional way. Instead, I've decided to document my first 7 days with the Nintendo Switch 2, talking about my experience with the console, what I like and don't like, any problems I've ran into, what games I've played, old and new, but most importantly, talking about if I think it is worth you buying a Nintendo Switch 2. So strap in as we rewind back to the 5th of June 2025, day 1 with my brand new Nintendo Switch 2. It's the Nintendo Switch 2's launch day. The console I had pre-ordered over 2 months ago has finally arrived. Once I got the thing out the box, I began to set up the console, I hooked it up to my TV and also my capture card so I can record lots of lovely Switch 2 footage for you all. Setting up this thing was pretty easy and painless, and man, it just feels so good to finally have a Nintendo Switch 2. Once done with the setup, I made it to the home menu, and you'll notice straight away that it's almost identical to the Switch 1's home menu, which isn't super exciting unfortunately, and we still don't have any themes apart from basic white and basic black. Why do you do this, Nintendo? After that disappointment, I hopped onto the eShop to go check out some games. And oh boy, this is a big improvement over the Switch 1. It has got a similar layout and categories, but the pages actually load quickly. There's very little lag, and it's nice to browse through the shop looking for new games to play. Good improvement. I picked up the Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, a game that really should be a pack-in title, but I would still like to check this out and learn what secrets the Nintendo Switch 2 is hiding. I also brought Deltarune as I'd like to start playing that later in the week, and added a couple of other games to my wishlist. Oh, and I also started downloading Mario Kart World since I got the Switch 2 bundle with the game. So now that I've got a solid lineup of Switch 2 games to play, where do I begin? Well, I think the most obvious starting point would be Welcome Tour, but I really want to dive into Mario Kart World, so let's start there. Oh, a 2-hour download. Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour is a bit of software that basically serves as an instruction manual for your new Switch 2. You pick an avatar and then you enter what is essentially a giant Nintendo Switch 2 museum. As you walk around, you will find and collect stamps representing different buttons and features of the Switch 2. There's some mini games that utilise the Switch 2's gimmicks like the mouse mode, and there's some interesting tech demos that aren't games, but they do show off more of the Switch 2's features. Like there's this one where the Joy-Cons act as maracas, with different sizes of balls in them. Another has you watch a clip and you have to work out how many frames per second that clip was playing in. That's quite a funny one. And my personal favourite so far is this one where you play the original Super Mario Bros 1-1 level, but they take the pixels from the game on the NES and map it to a 4K TV. The results make the level look really tiny in comparison because Super Mario Bros was an 8-bit game, and you actually find out that the original level does not even go far enough to reach the end of a 4K TV. It's a very quirky demonstration, but it really goes to show how far video game graphics have come over the last 40 years. I spent about 2 hours in Welcome Tour, and overall, I think it's a pretty neat piece of software. There's interesting things within here, and I think it's good we have software that teaches you everything you need to know about the Switch 2 and how it all works. It's good to learn about new hardware, especially when you drop a large sum of money on it. Like I paid £430 for this console in the UK, and it's roughly $500 over in America. Speaking of money though, I don't understand why Welcome Tour is not a free pack-in title that comes with the Switch 2. It does only cost like £8 here in the UK, but it still does feel like a slap in the face. Like Nintendo is squeezing extra money out of you for no good reason. If Welcome Tour was a free pack-in title, then I bet that public opinion on this piece of software would be a lot more positive. I would still recommend spending that extra bit of cash to get Welcome Tour, but man, this sucks that this wasn't a pack-in title. Anyway, I've had my fun with Welcome Tour for the day, and now it's time to jump into my most anticipated Switch 2 game. I have been waiting for a new Mario Kart for over 10 years, and it feels so good to finally play this game, and it looks so unbelievably gorgeous. I really wanted to go straight into free roam mode, but I thought I should at least check out some of the races first before diving into the open world. So I started out with the Mushroom Cup Grand Prix. I arrived at the starting line for Mario Bros Circuit, and then I was racing, and that first race felt so good. I was getting used to how controlling the karts worked, and I was struggling a little bit in the beginning, as after playing Mario Kart 8 for over 10 years, it takes some time for your brain to adjust to how this new game feels. But I was having so much fun. After the first race in a Grand Prix, instead of starting directly at the next track, you have to drive directly to it, and then you will complete a single lap of the track you just arrived at before moving on to the next race. I had an absolute blast driving from one course to the next. My only complaint so far is that I wish you got to do 3 laps of the course once you arrived instead of just 1. One full lap feels incredibly short, and I feel like you don't get to spend enough time learning these new track layouts. After completing Mushroom Cup and getting the gold trophy, I also tried out Flower Cup and got another gold trophy. And then I thought it was time to finally try out free roam to see what the open world was like. This was Mario Kart World's main selling point. I mean, world is even in the title, so does the open world live up to the hype? Well, I can't say yet, as I only got to drive around for an hour or so. I need a lot more time to gather up my thoughts on this world. My first initial hour was really fun though. I spent a lot of time exploring, completing a wide range of P-switch challenges, and I found a couple of hidden collectibles. After a lot of fun, I look at the clock and realise, oh whoops, it's midnight. I have work the next day, so I decided to call it for the night. I had an absolutely amazing first day with my brand new Switch 2, and I can't wait to play some more tomorrow. It's Friday the 6th of June. I wake up at 7 AM, go to work to do my day job, then once finished for the day, get home as fast as I can to play some more Switch 2. But on the way back home, I picked up some more Switch 2 related goodies. Firstly, I got a couple of extra games, Cyberpunk 2077 and Yakuza 0. I also managed to pick up a 256GB micro express SD card. I was hoping to get a bigger one, because if you look at my storage, even with the SD card, I'm still struggling a lot with space already, and Switch 2 games are gonna be much bigger in file size. I'll upgrade to a bigger card eventually, but they are quite hard to find in bigger sizes, and they are also a lot more costly, so I'll live with 256 for now. I then pretty much spent the rest of my day playing Mario Kart World. I tried out Knockout Tour for the first time today, a new mode where you race across a big chunk of the world in an elimination style race. There are 24 racers and 6 laps in total. After each lap, the bottom 4 players will get eliminated from the race, meaning that if you make it to the final lap, it will be a 4-player sprint finish to the end. These races can be so tense, especially if you end up in a situation where you are right on the edge of being able to qualify for the next lap. And that's what makes Knockout Tour so thrilling and incredibly fun to play. Currently my favourite mode in the game so far. I should also mention that for the first time today, I tried out playing in handheld, and holy heck, the Switch 2's new screen is gorgeous. It may not be an OLED, but this is a really high quality LCD screen. Playing Mario Kart World on this thing looked jaw-droppingly beautiful. After a lot more races, I was feeling pretty tired, so I figured I'd have an early night so that I could wake up tomorrow to check out some more games on my Switch 2. With the release of the Switch 2, some old Switch 1 games are getting brand new editions that are designed to take advantage of the Switch 2's new hardware. These editions offer things like unlocking higher resolutions and frame rates, reduced load times, but also some of these editions are adding extra content to the game. At launch, there are currently only 2 Switch 2 edition games, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. I don't have any intention of replaying these games at the moment, but I did want to check out what these new Switch 2 Edition games were offering. And also, you get a free upgrade pack for both Switch 2 editions of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, if you have a Nintendo Switch Online subscription expansion pass, so I figured I would take advantage of that. Of the two Zelda games, I decided to check out Breath of the Wild, but both games offer very similar improvements and features. Both games now run at 4K 60 frames per second, faster load times, an extra save file, and Zelda notes. We can forget about Zelda notes. I'm not going to lie, but playing Breath of the Wild in 4K 60 didn't feel real. Like, it felt like I was emulating the game or something. I even went to visit areas in the game that are known for causing the game to stutter, like Korok Forest, and it runs flawlessly with no frame dips whatsoever. I was really impressed. I also realised that I can now watch Hestu dance in 4K, which is glorious. I only spent around 20 to 30 minutes running around in Hyrule today, but I had a very joyful time checking out this new Switch 2 edition. After some Zelda, I took a bit of a break to edit and upload my Switch 2 unboxing video, but after that, my sibling, who has been in a Deltarune coma for the last 3 days, finally asked if they wanted to play the new Mario Kart with me, and there was no way I was going to turn down that offer. I won't talk much about Mario Kart World again, because I've already spoken about it twice in this video already, but I will say that playing in co-op was a lot of fun, and the game still holds a solid 60 frames per second when doing 2-player split screen, which is very nice. After that, we decided to check out something new and exclusive for the Switch 2, the Gamecube Classics. This is another one of the perks you get for having a Nintendo Switch Online expansion pass. There are currently at launch only 3 games available on this service, and we decided to check out SoulCalibur 2. We had never played this before, but apparently this was one of the best fighting games released back in its day, and it still feels great to play in 2025. They've got a huge roster of characters here, some great stages, and Link is playable, which is very cool. I had a lot of fun trying this one out, even though I'm notoriously bad with fighting games. The GameCube was a little bit before my time because I grew up with the Wii, so I'm excited to check out more GameCube games when they get added to this service. Although the file size for this application is already 3.5 gigabytes, and we've only got 3 games on here, so I'm a little worried about how much space this is going to take up in the future, but that's a problem to worry about for another day. I have managed to play a lot already today, but I decided to end my day by continuing my adventure in Xenoblade X. This is not a Switch 2 Edition game, and there isn't even a standard patch to improve this game's visuals and frame rate for the Switch 2 yet, but I did start playing this game shortly after it launched for the Switch 1, and I didn't want to just drop it because some shiny new hardware came out. This was also a good opportunity to check that all my Switch 1 save data has been carried over to the Switch 2, and thankfully it has. I haven't lost 90 hours of progress on this JRPG, thank God. As there hasn't been a Switch 2 patch for Xenoblade X yet, the game runs the same as it did back on Switch 1. The only difference being that the frame rate now stays fully locked at 30 and doesn't dip at all, which is all well and good. I won't talk much else about this game since it's not new for the Switch 2, but I did manage to beat the main story and roll credits that night, which felt like such a good feeling. I've still got a couple of side activities left to do and an epilogue to play through, but I'm pretty much nearly finished with the game now, so I need to find a new RPG to play through.
Good morning, Night City! Yesterday's body count lottery rounded out to a solid and sturdy 30. 10 out of Haywood, thanks to unabated gang wars.
We have been very lucky to have lots of big third-party games for the launch of Nintendo Switch 2, and Cyberpunk 2077 is arguably one of the biggest for the lineup. Like how Skyrim was the big showcase third-party game that pushed the original Switch's hardware limitations to its max, Cyberpunk is that, but for Switch 2. So how well does this game perform? So this is what the game actually looks like when in quality mode, and I got to say that even though it may look nicer on other platforms, I think it looks perfectly fine on the Switch 2. I had a bit of a negative reaction to this game's look at first, as one of the starting routes is in the desert and it looks blurry as hell out here, but once you actually get into Night City, you notice that a lot of the buildings and interiors are really well detailed, along with the character models too. In quality mode, the game runs at a solid 30 frames frames per second, which is probably the best way to play this game, as performance mode runs at an unusual 40 frames per second. Aside from looks, this game ran really well with minimal issues, which I was very surprised about. I played this game on my PC back in 2020 and ran into loads of problems, but I barely had any here, and I was having so much more fun playing this on my Switch 2 as well. The Switch 2 also adds in gyro aiming, which is fire, and also some other additional control methods like mouse controls, touchscreen controls, and more gyro motion control methods, which are very cool to have. This ultimate version of Cyberpunk also includes the Phantom Liberty DLC for free, which again is another nice bonus to have, and something I'm looking forward to diving into at some point. This is a visually impressive game for Switch 2, and it sets the bar high for other third-party ports to the system. The game, however, did crash when I looked in the mirror to try and change my appearance, which I figured was my sign to stop playing for a bit. Another game I got to try out today was The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. Many Switch 1 games have free updates for the Switch 2 that allow the games to run better and take advantage of the newer hardware. Visual enhancements, frame rate boosts, HDR support, and added game share functionality tend to be things that can be added in these free updates. The main difference between these free updates and the Switch 2 edition games is that the Switch 2 editions will usually go the extra mile and add in some extra content to the game to improve it, which is why these editions cost a bit of extra money, while these updates are completely free. For Echoes of Wisdom, the image quality has been improved, but most importantly, the game now runs at a rock solid 60 FPS with no frame drops in sight. The game did try to target 60 FPS back on the Switch 1, but there were often lots of times where the game would dip below that, but thankfully Switch 2 has fixed the problem. Also new in this free update is that you can now choose the favourite echoes you like to use the most, and you can easily select them in the new sub menu, so you don't have to scroll forever in this awfully designed horizontal line to switch between the echoes you like. Many people, including myself, did not like the UI in this game, so I'm glad Nintendo actually went to the effort to improve it a little bit in this free update. I have already completed Echoes of Wisdom, but I was impressed by this new free update to the game, and I did enjoy running around Hyrule slaying some enemies with my favourite echoes. And that's how I ended day 4 with the Nintendo Switch 2. Today is Monday, so unfortunately I have to go back to work for another week, so my gaming time for these next 3 days will be kept pretty short. I did, however, after work, manage to try out the first chapter in Yakuza 0 Director's Cut. This is another Switch 2 launch game, and it was one of the ones I was most excited about. At the start of the year, I made a pledge to myself that this would be the year where I take my first dive into the Yakuza series. I didn't know at the time that a new version of Yakuza 0 would be coming to Switch 2 on launch day, and this just seemed like the perfect game that would get me into the series. The Director's Cut version of the game also adds in extra cutscenes and story content, as well as an English dub, which is something I hugely appreciate. I really enjoyed my time with this action RPG, and I'm definitely going to have this game completed by the end of the year. My only gripe with this game, however, is that the physical is a game keycard. Let me explain what that means. For people who like to buy physical games, there are 2 different types of cartridges to be aware of when buying games for the Switch 2. There's the regular ones where the game is stored on the cartridge, which are the good ones, and the other types are known as game key cards. These cartridges don't contain the full game on the card, so once you put them into your system, they will start to download the rest of the game from the eShop, and then when you want to play it, you have to make sure that the game keycard is within your Nintendo Switch 2. As a physical collector myself, I have a lot of problems with these Switch 2 game keycards. They take up a lot of your system memory, you'll have to wait for the full game to be downloaded once inserting the cartridge for the first time, and if the eShop servers go down one day, you won't be able to play the game if you don't have the rest of the game data downloaded onto your Switch 2, which is not good for video game preservation at all. The only reason we have these game keycards is because using them saves game publishers money, as the standard Switch 2 cartridges are a lot more pricey compared to the game keycards. This is why you will notice that so many third-party games are opting to use game keycards, like Yakuza 0, where it gives you a warning sign on the box, and also the cartridge has a key on it. Cyberpunk 2077, however, is one of the only few third-party games that uses a proper cartridge with the full game stored on it. So I only had to put the game into my Switch Switch, and then I could start playing it immediately, which was such a blessing. For Yakuza 0, when I put that into my Switch, I had to wait 4 hours before I could start playing that game, and it takes up 45 gigabytes of storage space, while compared to Cyberpunk 2077, there's no waiting and hardly any storage space used since it's all on the cartridge. I really dislike game keycards, but unfortunately, it seems we are just going to have to live with them during the Switch 2 era. On to day 6, and I knew that at some point after getting my Switch 2, I wanted to test out Pokémon Scarlet and Violet to see how well they ran on the new system. We all know that these Pokémon games ran terribly back on the Switch 1. Poor visuals, awful frame rate, bugs and glitches all over the place. It was a huge mess. So can the Switch 2 fix these Pokémon games? Well, both games did receive a free Switch 2 update that aims to optimize the visuals and improve the frame rate. So that's a promising sign things have gotten a bit better. After having played Pokémon Violet on Switch 2, I can confirm that the game does now run a lot smoother at a solid 60 frames per second. It felt kind of jarring to see a Pokémon game looking super smooth, but I'm glad that these games actually run better now. I also noticed some actions in the game seem to have been sped up, like battles, and more Pokémon are now able to be on the screen at the same time, which makes the world feel a lot more populated. So performance wise, the games are a lot better now, but visually, the game still looks worse than many PS2 games. I mean, look at this shot. That building in the background looks blurry as hell. And also, when I was gliding around some hills and the sea is literally just a singular light blue colour. There's also still a ton of pop-in within the game, like when in the city where textures of buildings were suddenly loading in as I was getting close to them. I could list countless other examples of these Pokemon games looking like dog but you don't need to hear me rant about all of that. I'm glad that these games at least perform better on Switch 2, but visually, they still look really bad. At least the music in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is still really good, as some of it was composed by Toby Fox. Oh yeah, speaking of Toby Fox, developed by the mastermind Toby Fox, Deltarune is another Switch 2 launch game. Chapters 1 and 2 have been available for a while now on other platforms, but chapters 3 and 4 are brand new. And you can buy all these chapters in one go for only £20, which is a steal. I only just recently recompleted an Undertale playthrough to get myself ready for Deltarune, and oh boy, this game is incredible. I only played an hour of chapter 1, but I had so much fun in that first hour. I don't want to say much else, as it's so much better to go into the game blind for a first playthrough. A lot of people have been very excited for Deltarune on Switch 2, specifically the brand new chapters. The game certainly lives up to the hype, and it's an essential Switch 2 game to own. And after my time with Deltarune, that pretty much marked the end of day 6 with my Switch 2. Okay, we are now on to day 7. After today, it would have been 1 week since I first got my hands on the Nintendo Switch 2. After getting back from work for that day and sitting down with my Switch 2, I had lots of options for games I could play, like chilling out with some Mario Kart World, booting up Xenoblade X to finish up some of the remaining side quests, or I could continue with one of the many RPGs I have started playing this week. But for the sake of this video, I wanted to play something different each day so that I had a wide variety of games I could cover in one video. So I opened up the eShop to have a look at some other Switch 2 launch games I could play today. And I haven't said it yet already, but the launch lineup for Switch 2 is really strong, and there's literally a game here for everyone. Some contenders for games I was tempted by was Square Enix's Bravely Default remaster, although it's another RPG and I've already covered a lot of those in this video already. I also saw Fantasy Life I: The Girl Who Steals Time, and I was very tempted by this one, as it is a brand new game, but it does cost about £52, and I've already spent a lot of money on games this week, but I have added this one onto my wish list to play later in the year. Split Fiction, a fantastic co-op game, but I don't have any friends, so I can't play that one. After browsing around a bit more, I decided to end my first week with Switch 2 by playing this.
Fast Fusion.
Fast Fusion is basically what I would call a modern F-Zero game. It may not be developed by Nintendo, but the Fast series is made by a company called Shinen, and they have been supporting every Nintendo console launch since the Wii U. Their Switch 2 launch game is also only £13, which is what swayed me to get the game, and Fast Fusion is definitely worth the price. Like I said, this game feels like a modern day F-Zero game, with it being a high-speed futuristic racer. Once you learn the basic controls, the game will become incredibly addictive as you try to maintain some ridiculously high speeds as you race across many different tracks. This is also a game that is a real visual showcase for the Switch 2, with it featuring 4 different performance modes, each with varying different fidelities and frame rate options to choose from. I personally stayed in quality mode, which makes the game run at 4K 60, but the developers have also talked about adding in a 120 FPS mode in the future, which would be a really crazy but cool thing to experience. But yeah, after playing through this game for a couple of hours, that pretty much wraps up my first week with Nintendo Switch 2. So now that I've had a full week with the Nintendo Switch 2 and I've been able to try out many different games for the platform, what are my thoughts on this new console? Well, I absolutely love it. The Switch 2 has improved upon the Switch 1 in every possible way. Bigger, more comfortable Joy-Cons, a beautiful LCD screen, it loads faster, games can now be played in 4K 60 frames per second, potentially even 120 frames for some games, the new mouse mode feels fantastic, and most importantly, I had a ton of fun playing some great games on this new console. The Switch 2 does have its issues. People who used to own a Switch OLED will most likely be disappointed that the Switch 2 only has an LCD screen. The battery life doesn't last for very long when in handheld mode, 256GB of storage space will get filled up very quickly, the console can get pretty toasty at times, and game keycards feel like a middle finger to physical collectors. But despite these problems, I've still really enjoyed my time with this console so far. So, is it worth buying a Nintendo Switch 2? Well, the short answer is yes, absolutely. If you are a fan of Nintendo games, or if you want to play some of your favourite video games on the go, or if you just want to know what all the fuss is about, I would recommend the Switch 2 to anyone. I loved my first week with this console, and I'm sure I'm going to enjoy the many years to come with my Nintendo Switch 2. And if you want to see my raw impressions on this console as I unbox it, then go check out this video on the screen right now. Thanks so much for making it to the end of this video, I've really enjoyed making it, and make sure to subscribe as I've got tons of Switch 2 videos to come, including lots of Mario Kart World videos too.